How to Write a Novel, the Definitive Guide. As we always say, writing a novel is an art. Whether if is their first or nth, no one can just finish writing a book without proper planning. From creating a unique plotline to penning a mind-boggling climax, there are many aspects involved in writing a novel. You can simplify the book publishing process by writing your book in the most flawless manner possible. Ever helpful, we have compiled a guide that will help you through the various stages of writing a novel. Here is a definitive guide to writing a novel. Story. When you decide to write a novel, you obviously have a story in mind. A two-liner is enough to create a bestseller, provided you know how to build an interesting piece from this simple plot line. Start developing your two-line story to a four-liner by adding more relevant context. For example, if your two-line story is 7 people take a tour to Jim Corbett. One after another, they start disappearing. Now, build the context. 7 people take a tour to Jim Corbett. Each of them hides something from the rest. One after another, they start to die. They start to suspect each other. Go on, and on until a point where you are clear on how the story is going to unfold. You build your foundation and your structure this way. Structure and genre. You have created the heart of your story and expanded it. Now it's time to flesh it out. Lay the framework and see how you're going to move from point A to point B. So these 7 people have gone to Jim Corbett. How did they get there? How do they know each other? Who dies first? Is it one by one? How much focus is there going to be on the deaths? Is the more of a story on bonding or a good thriller? This is where knowing the genre of your book comes in handy. Now this is never going to be set in stone. You could start with a drama and launch into a thriller depending on where imagination takes you. But knowing the genre you're aiming for helps guide you. It gives you something to aim for and stick to if you veer too far off track. Your story could be about a murder, but you can still make it a funny novel. On the other hand, you can also write a horror movie with a romantic backdrop. Also, do not choose a style just because it seems fancy or intriguing. One of the biggest mistakes many writers make is choosing the wrong genre. If you have written short stories in the past, you might, by now, know which genre you are good at. Pick a genre that you're comfortable with, especially if it's your first novel. Some authors have even won the Booker Prize for their debut novels. While they did write a genuinely intriguing and exciting story, most of them wrote in the genre they are good at. Characterization. This is the most crucial but often ignored aspect of novel writing. Readers prefer to read novels that make them feel a connection with the story. Even if you are writing fiction or fantasy, people would love it if they could relate to your characters. That being said, the characters shouldn't feel confusing. Therefore, before even writing your first chapter, create a character map. Jot down the name and the primary characteristics of each and every important character in your novel. Note everything from their eye color to their hobbies, how they act in a particular situation to their pet peeves. This way, you will be clear about each and every character. This list will be helpful in defining each and every character in your novel. The point of view. Once you have decided on the characterization, story, and genre, you must decide how the story is going to be written. This is different from structure as it is through whose eyes the reader will explore the book's world. It controls how your structure is shaped. There are 6 basic types of point of view. First person. This is when the story is written from the point of view of one of the protagonists of the story. First-person peripheral. This is when the narrator of the story is a supporting character in the novel and not one of the protagonists. This way, the narration still uses I, but some scenes in the story will happen to the protagonist and the narrator will not have access to those events. Second person. The story will be told from the perspective of you. This is mostly used in non-fiction and self-help books. Third person limited. The story is told from a third person's point of view, but the narrator's knowledge of events is limited to that of one of the characters. In simple terms, The narrator will tell the readers only what one of the characters knows. This kind of point of view works well for thriller novels. Third-person multiple. The story is told in a third-person point of view, but the narrator moves from one character to another. In short, the narrator tells us from the point of view of more than one character. Third-person omniscient. The narrator knows and shares everything. It's more like voiceovers in movies. The narrator says plenty of things about the characters that the character themselves won't know. This kind of point of view works well with romantic novels. Study, understand, and choose your point of view before starting your novel. Don't wait till editing to follow a proper point of view. A good novel is something that has clear narration. A recent trend is to write in first-person multiple, that is writing the story in a first-person point of view, but the narration shifts from one protagonist to another. Tense. Before writing the novel, another thing that you must finalize on is the tense in which the story is written. Most stories are written in either past or present tense. Very rarely is future tense used. No matter which tense you choose, it's important to maintain the consistency in the tense used. Most editors hate tense change errors. Novel length. Have a rough word count that you want to hit when you finish the novel. Most novels are somewhere around 70,000 words. If your story demands it, you can consider stretching it by another 30,000 to 35,000 words. Similarly, there are excellent novels that are short and crisp at maybe 50,000 words. Depending on your genre and writing style, have an upper and lower limit set. Writing the first chapter. After all the thinking, pondering over, rethinking, and deciding, there comes the time where you have to write your first chapter. Remember that the first chapter is the one that your editor, publisher, or even a potential reader will read before deciding to pick the book. The good old proverb, "A first impression is the best impression," works perfectly well in this context. Start with a bang. However, do not be fake. While introducing characters in the first chapter is not a bad idea, it is better if you start by setting the mood of the story. Some of the tips for writing a great first chapter are: keep it short and simple, somewhere between 300–500 words. Mention all the important things, time period, location, season, etc. Reveal the core of your book. It can be a character, an event, or dialogue. Start your first chapter with that. Write, rewrite, and rewrite until you are happy. Dialogues. Your book should neither look like the script of a stage play with too many dialogues nor like a monologue or a press release without much dialogue. Try to have a balance. Understand which scenes feel good when conveyed as dialogue and which will feel good as narration. Read our blog on how to write scintillating dialogues. To know more. Telling versus showing. More than once you would have come across people talking about telling versus showing. If you are wondering what it's all about, read on. A common mistake that many debut writers make is to tell the reader the events of a story or how a character is feeling rather than showing it. In report writing, article writing, and journalism, telling a story works. However, when it comes to writing a book, especially if it is fiction, creating the illusion of being there in the story is what people prefer. Seeing events happen is what many readers want from a book. For example, when we read the Harry Potter series, we felt like we were right next to the boy wizard. That's what works in fiction writing. Words to cut from your novel. Okay, so you are finally at a great writing pace. At this juncture, you must pay attention to the words you write. There are a few things that you must avoid. Repetitive adjectives. We are bound to use common adjectives like beautiful, amazing, etc. very commonly. Try to replace those common terms with relevant synonyms. Time-based adjectives. Time-based adjectives are bound to make your prose weak. Avoiding them is wise. Verbs that end with ing, similar to time-based adverbs, ing verbs also seem to weaken your prose. Use tools like Grammarly, Ginger, Copyscape, etc. to check the grammar, sentence flow, and authenticity of your work. Here is a list of top writing tools for authors. Punctuation and grammar. Last but not the least, punctuation and grammar is quite important in any form of writing. While your editors will rectify grammar issues, you must make sure that your grammar and punctuation is good to the extent that both you and the editor are on the same page when it comes to knowing the meaning of a sentence. If your work has none or minimal grammar errors, it gives the editor more time to reread your book and improve the plot further. We hope you find this guide useful. What are some of the other things that you follow while writing a novel? Share it with us in the comments section below.